Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Hopefully, can you hear me at the back? Just somebody give us a wave. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Jonathan, I'm really grateful for that introduction. And like I say, it's a pleasure to be here. I've got a presentation that I'm quickly going to go through. I've got 15 minutes, the same as everybody else. I'm going to talk about the terrorist threat as we see it in the UK. I'm going to talk about the government strategy in the UK and how we actually tackle it, which of course equates to policing. And then lastly, I'm going to give some kind of live practitioner examples because I am an operational cop at the end of the day. And I'm going to give some live examples in the UK, particularly in London, around what that threat actually means on the ground. So, terrorism, really complex area, as we've heard. I'm going to keep it really simple. This triangle here, to me, basically hits the nail on the head around how we see terrorism and the threat in the UK. Online, the threat in the UK itself, and then the threat from international terrorism. So let me deal with online first of all. So the previous speaker spoke about the modern internet. And of course, if we look at IS in particular, we've seen a massive amount of propaganda getting onto the internet. So we've seen the likes of Inspire magazine and Dabiq, so both IS and AQ related magazines published generally on a monthly basis. And what we're seeing is individuals back in the UK downloading that material and getting ideas, advice and guidance and support. We're also seeing direction and control coming across from the internet into lone actors back in the UK. That material has been used to self-radicalise individuals and self-radicalise groups. And the most concerning for me is if you take a lone actor of an individual that I would call a kind of bedroom keyboard warrior, so generally a young man in their bedroom at home who's accessing this material, getting ideas, support and guidance in relation to committing an attack in the UK. That's really difficult for police and the security and intelligence agencies to actually combat and try and prevent. However, what I will say is most of the disruption plots in the UK that we have disrupted and arrested individuals, most of the evidence that we actually present at a prosecution now is coming from the internet and coming from digital media. So coming from telephones, laptops, and particularly messaging, mostly out of Syria. What we're seeing is increased use of encryption, and of course legislation, what I would call now coming in, actually we are going dark across the country in relation to some of that evidence and some of that intercepting communications. So as a result, collectively, that's a challenge for all of us going forward. The other point on the triangle then is the UK. So what are we seeing actually on the ground? Well, what we're seeing is lone actors using that propaganda material to self-radicalise. We're seeing groups of individuals who are intent on either travelling overseas to join IS or actually staying in the UK to commit attacks. We're seeing homegrown attack cells, and we're seeing trained operatives coming out of Syria across Europe and actually trying to enter the UK again to commit attacks. Lastly then is international. So again, you know, fighters, as I've said, trained operatives coming across Europe out of Syria, and as a result we're building our international network to try and combat that threat before they even get to the UK. And of course we're also seeing attacks on British interests overseas. Tunisia as a good example, which is or has been the biggest loss of British life since the attacks in London since 7/7. So how do we deal with it? Well, this is the government strategy. It's called the 4 Ps. Prevent, pursue, protect and prepare. And all of that is ultimately with a view to reducing threat and vulnerability and ultimately reducing the risk. So I'm going to quickly touch on some of those. So prevent, what does that mean? Well, that's all about safeguarding. It's working with other government statutory agencies such as housing, health, education, ultimately with a view to preventing individuals getting into a life of terrorism. So the way I would explain that is an individual would get referred into the Prevent programme. We have a programme called Channel, and ultimately it's with a view to getting that individual back onto the right track to prevent them committing a terrorist attack. Pursue is more the kind of core business that I do. So that's actually preventing disruption and arresting and prosecuting individuals. Protect, well, that's all about target hardening that Alistair spoke about this morning, such as Project Servitor in the City of London, and it's about increasing our security at borders. And then lastly is prepare. So that's a testing and exercising to make sure that we're ready. So I pose the question to you, if an attack happened tomorrow, are you ready? Are your staff ready? Do they really know what to do? So prepare is all about exercising and testing. Well, this is the structure that we have in the UK. So if I start at the bottom is very much about community engagement, safer neighbourhood teams, the local connection. So as you go up this kind of triangle, if you like, this is what I would call the local to global policing kind of structure, if you like, in the UK. So as I've said, down the bottom, that's all about the community engagement. So it's getting information from communities. It's about working with communities and NGOs, and actually the low level across local authorities to make sure it's a joined up approach. And then as you go up that tier, as you get towards the top, so where you've got the national counter-terrorism units, that's actually me, if you like, certainly for London. So the biggest counter-terrorism unit in the UK is in London, and those are the units that I manage. And then sat above me at the top is Assistant Commissioner Specialist Operations, so that's Mark Rowley in the UK, and the Senior National Coordinator. We then literally reach out overseas as well. So this is the international approach. So currently I've got 27 CTPLOs, they're called Counter-Terrorism Police Liaison Officers around the world across 16 countries. And because we have been so successful working with MI6 in particular, and actually preventing the attacks coming to the UK in the first place, we are now expanding that to 50. So we're going from 27 up to 50 CTPLOs around the world, and we are moving into some new countries. We're also looking at how we share our biometrics, and lastly is around protect and prepare. So coming back to my earlier point around how we can help different countries around the world learn from our experiences and target harden to prevent the attacks happening. So let's bring it back into the threat into the UK. So the threat in the UK, we have 5 different levels. The top being critical. We are currently at severe, which is the next one down. We've been at severe since 2014, which means an attack is highly likely. If it gets to critical, it means an attack is imminent. But we've been at severe since 2014. And this is primarily on the back of Al-Adnani's speech in 2014, which obviously you can read it yourself, but the points I'd like you to pick out are the bits that are underlined. Because what Al-Adnani was saying there is attack the police, the security and intelligence agencies across America and Europe and kill them in any way you can. And if you look at some of the analyses across the world, but also back in the UK, but primarily across the world, this speech had a massive influence on trained operatives, and what we saw is a spike in attacks at that period of time, and more recently up to the current day. So in the UK, we saw a number of attack plans actually being hatched, and that's why our threat level went up to severe. So a real key, if you like, changing moment, if you like, for us in the UK around our threat levels. If I bring it up to date, though, this is more recently. This is May 2016. Again, Al-Adnani. On this occasion, again, if I focus on the underlined part, what he's now saying is attack civilians during the period of Ramadan. And again, we saw a spike in attacks, particularly across the world, but also attack plans back in the UK as well. And one British journalist actually quoted as saying, it's probably been one of the bloodiest Ramadans on record. Goes to show the influence of Al-Adnani. But the threat hasn't gone away. At the moment, I've spoken about IS, of course, Al-Qaeda, and I'm not going to rehearse some of the conversations from earlier on session, but more importantly for us, as in the UK, we also have Northern Ireland-related terrorism. So the IRA, the Continuity IRA, and they haven't gone away. So they don't get the publicity like they used to, but last year, 16 national terrorism plots disrupted across Ireland, and even as late as last week, we saw a number of munitions, chemicals, and ammunition and explosives found both in the UK and back in Northern Ireland, which ultimately we think was going to be used to attack both the police and the military. I'd probably add another box on there as well. I'd probably also add domestic extremism. because certainly as we move toward Brexit, certainly for the UK moving out of Europe, we've already seen a spike in hate crime across various communities. We've seen an increase in extreme right-wing and left-wing activity, and certainly I think domestic extremism is going to be a continued threat and is probably going to increase into the future. So what are we seeing on the ground? So you'll recognise some of those pictures from the media, and if I go from the kind of top left around, that's Nice. You know, Nice, what you've got there is an individual who wasn't really on security service or police radar, was able to hire a heavy goods vehicle and, as you know, drive along the promenade and kill a large number of people. As we move along, then that's Michael Adebolajo, who killed Lee Rigby, Fusilier, in London, in Greenwich, in 2013. And if you look at his attack method, it almost was as simple as a kitchen knife. You then come across to Tunisia. So that's the armed gunman in Tunisia with automatic weapons, killed a large number of British tourists, but other tourists along the beach and in the hotel. You come down the bottom, there you've got Charlie Hebdo. Again, coordinated attacks with a number of terrorists using automatic weapons. Then we move into Brussels and Belgium, which was attack at an airport, as you know, and certainly a railway station. On that occasion, they were using homemade explosives. Then we have Orlando in America. Again, automatic weapons used to commit an attack at a nightclub. And then lastly is the Russian Metrojet, which in essence was an IED used to bring down an aeroplane. And I think what this slide actually does for me is presents real challenges for all of us in counter-terrorism policing and also the security and intelligence agencies around a range of complex of threats and how we actually deal with it and challenge it. So what else are we seeing on the ground? So I'm going to give you two case examples now, just very quickly. These are recent, so both of these cases were convicted at court, excuse me, back in the UK this year. So the first one is Operation Exactness. So Hassan and Majid, the top two individuals, I would class them as the terrorists, and the two guys to the right, Hamlet and Cuffy, they were the armourers who supplied the firearms. Hassan was studying medicine at a university in Sudan, and Majid was studying physics at King's College in London. So both academics. Hassan was definitely the ringleader. He used material, the propaganda material, like I spoke about earlier on online, to actually radicalise the others into committing this attack. And in essence, what their plot was to get hold of firearms that you'll see at the bottom, which were being held by Cuffy. They were going to get hold of a moped, and both Majid and Hassan were going to do a drive-by shooting at Shepherd's Bush Police Station, which is the picture in the bottom, to kill police officers or members of the public. Or if they weren't successful there, next door was the military barracks, which is the other picture on the other side, and actually kill some of our military officers. They were then going to lie low and then commit an attack probably about a week later. Those individuals sentenced recently to about 20 years in prison. Obviously, we recovered 5 firearms, ammunition, a silencer, and they were in the process of getting the moped. The other case is Operation Greyhead. Really significant case, 2 individuals from Luton, which is just north of London. These 2 individuals, their initial plan was to travel out to Syria and join IS. And the kind of iPhone messages in the middle, when we arrested them, we found 64,000 messages on that iPhone going backwards and forwards to foreign fighters in Syria. They were taking direction and guidance and decided not to actually travel to Syria, but in the end decided to commit an attack in London. So Junaid Khan, who was the main individual, he was a delivery driver, delivered medicine at various different locations across eastern England. And what his plot was to obtain a knife. As he drove around and delivered his medicine, he was then going to pick an American soldier who had driven off a military base in eastern England. He was going to crash his delivery driver into their car, and he was going to literally behead them in the street. Interestingly, when we arrested them, we found the propaganda material, so Inspire magazine on the screen. But probably more importantly, you can't really see it there, but it looks like a pressure cooker. What he had done is actually got plans to how to build a pressure cooker bomb, and part of his plot was that if the police intervened at any stage in his plot, he would have detonated the pressure cooker bomb, killed himself, committed martyrdom, but more importantly would have also killed the American soldier if he was still alive, or she, but also would have killed the police officers as well. The other picture down the bottom is an American diner. And the relevance of that, you'll see two flags flying there. You'll see an American flag and a British flag. As part of the surveillance, you'll see, it's quite difficult to see, but you'll see a flagpole there with nothing on it. And what he actually did in the middle of the night, he went to that American diner, he stole an American flag, the other American flag that's missing, and he stole a British flag. And part of his plot was when he was going to behead the soldier, he would have used those flags to actually film himself and then post on social media, again adding weight to the propaganda material on the internet. Of course, we've also got foreign fighters travelling out of the UK. Probably one of the most infamous pictures there is Jihadi John. We've also seen an increase in particularly women and young people travelling out. 850 is our assessment of individuals who have travelled out from the UK and to join terrorist organisations overseas. So what are we doing? Well, we're increasing our firearms capability, we're extending our reach internationally, coming back to those CTPLOs. We're looking at expanding our digital capability, going back to mobile phones and laptops, and also our interoperability across various different security and intelligence agencies, but probably more importantly also the National Crime Agency, because it does take us into the serious and organised crime world. So I'm going to finish up on a quote. It's a quote from the IRA. And I think, certainly conferences such as this are important. It does give us the opportunity to network and to find out best practice and good ideas of what is happening across the world in relation to counter-terrorism policing. And I suppose I want to finish on the importance of sharing information. And certainly from the UK's perspective, we are very keen to cooperate and work with various countries around the world. And that my key message is as long as they're human rights compliant. But collectively, again, coming back to the quote from the IRA, we need to be lucky every time, which is the importance of sharing information. The terrorists only need to be lucky once. Thank you very much.